Thank you, Chairman Cannon. And I do apologize that this wasn't on your agenda, but when we talked yesterday, I thought it was very important to make note of some of our officers' efforts up in the Gatlinburg effort, as Commissioner Ripley indicated. And I'll try to tie this in, but going back to Orca, when I asked these guys to send me in some photographs, which is rolling here, and this is Jason. We'll get this. I wanted to roll, but I'm trying to tie in the fact that when you ask these officers, they're so humbled, it's difficult to get some pictures that I wanted to show for y'all, and it's just that they're humble. That's all smoke. But now, when you got 285 orcas and you tell them they're free to come and get, they're there like in 30 minutes. I don't know how you get from East Tennessee to Nashville in 30 minutes to get a free orca. But to try to get pictures of their efforts, it's difficult to do. So these were just some of the pictures I wanted to show y'all, to share with you that's from their perspective. And I've got a few more. But basically, the Gatlinburg fires is such an event that hasn't happened in like 100 years that we've never been faced with. But these fires impacted over like 17,000 acres of land, and over 1,400 homes and business were also affected. And up to date, I think there is 13 fatalities as a result of these fires. But from November 29th to December 2nd, we had 28 TWRA personnel. They searched over 270 individual structures of what remained of them. And then they cleared over 300 standing condominium units, logging over 870 hours. Their mission was to search the Ski Mountain area. They were to locate survivors and or deceased and document the location of any if found and secure the scene for TBI. In addition, our personnel also checked the permitted facilities in the area, the American Eagle Foundation, the Ober-Gatlinburg, and then also a private bear facility. Our agency assets that were used during this event were, of course, our four-wheel drive trucks, ATVs, UTVs, and chainsaws. But what is very important note that came to fruition is these Motorola Apex 700 megahertz radios. So that gave us the ability to go to the command post. It gave us, we could interface now with all the emergency agencies that were called on scene, and more importantly, it was paramount that we talk to the command center so our mission would be a success, because as you well know, the cell phones were non-existent up there. So I don't know if y'all depicted the series is not to be outdone by Region 4. Here comes Region 3. Polk and McMinn County get on November 30th get a tornado. So now TEMA has requested our officers to also assist in those mission efforts. So we had 7 officers assist in Polk County. Their operations were search and recovery. They cleared roads, they closed roads, and they provided medical assistance. And then we had 3 officers that were called out to McMinn County with some road closures. So I say all this, there's the tornado stuff right there, as you can well see. The first was the fire. Where's Jason? There you are. We're gonna try to show the video. It's not a good video, but you can imagine our officers out there on the scene, and this is all homemade video. You'll have to. So that's them trying to respond to the scene and get to the call. So there's just a couple clips from, that's our cell phones. So it's not good video, but just to show you the stuff they were faced with when they got called to the scene. So I say all this to say this. As Director Carter once well put it, he wouldn't expect anything less from our officers. They are that good. So if you got any questions.
Darren, thank you. I was going to say I was amazed, but no, I wasn't the least bit surprised when I was on the phone Tuesday with Brian Ripley, and how our folks were drawn to it. They were going to help. You remember this time last year, the number of our staff that looked for the child who was lost in West Tennessee and the conditions there. We've got a great group of folks. And the biggest problem I know, at least for Region 4, that John has dealt with is that there were so many of the rest of our staff saying, I want to go, I want to go. And there wasn't a place for them to go. And to the point they were adamant about it. We've got some phenomenal officers, and I'll end my talking, but I want to personally say thank you to them And there's a support staff behind them, dispatchers, people back at the office. It's team ball. We've got one of the best teams in this nation in my eyes. Are there any comments from the commission? Mr. Swan?
Yes, my wife Vicki and I went to Gatlinburg yesterday and toured some of the areas where the homes had burned. I can tell you it's much, much worse than they're showing on TV. It's awful. We went back down to Pigeon Forge, and there were tractor trailers after tractor trailers of goods and things for the people who had lost their homes and lost everything in the fire. We went to one facility where it was an old closed barn, and people who had lost their homes and businesses and so forth, all they had to do is show their driver's license. They gave them a buggy, and they went through and they filled the buggy with anything they wanted and walked out with it free. They have asked that no more in-kind donations be sent other than monetary because they don't have places for it. The only thing that I'm concerned about, right now it's on the forefront of everybody's mind, but 3 months from now, 6 months from now, these people will still need help. And it's my hope that the goods and the money and everything will still come in. I can say that area has, and Commissioner Ripley, I'm sure will agree with me, that area has come together. And everywhere you look, it says Smoky Strong.
Commissioner Cox?
I want to echo what our chairman said, and I talked a little bit about this to John last night, but in 2005, when New Orleans flooded, we had 20, 30 guys go down there and put their lives on the line, and several other instances, these two that you've seen, but when the going gets really, really tough, they call TWRA, and we've got the men that would go anywhere and do anything, and they got the equipment. And this is what we discuss up here is important, but it's not that important. This is real life, lives on the line, and our guys are just great. And I'll brag on them enough. They're just really super people, and we really appreciate them.
Any other thoughts? Darren, thank you. And we do please thank the men and women who were up there. One quick story, I promise quick. We had an officer who had to have an emergency appendectomy, 2 weeks, prior to this event, and I believe Roy. And guess who was up at the command post representing TWRA and helping coordinate? He's limited on what he can lift, but he was there. That's just the kind of people we have. And there's story after story after story. We're blessed, folks. We truly are blessed. Commissioner Ripley, you got any closing words? So I think it'd be appropriate for you.
You know, it's going to be a challenge for a long time to come. And I think what Bill was saying about us not forgetting it 6 months from now is very, very important. So thanks to everyone for all your calls and concern, and Region 4 guys, Brian Ripley, really jumped on the thing and made us all proud. And we're very thankful for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. John, please pass on our deepest appreciation to Region 3 because I think it was 2 tornadoes that they had to deal with. We're going to continue with the agenda. Moving forward, Commission recognizes Trey Teague, Chair of the Wildlife Management Committee. Commissioner Teague, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Kennon. I'd like to recognize Brad Miller, Region 4 Elk Program Coordinator.
Good morning, everyone. This morning I'm going to share with you a brief overview of a few issues related to elk, and the first being related to supplemental feeding. Supplemental feeding occurs primarily out in the western U.S., and there are a few reasons that they do it, with number one being reducing winter mortality. particularly of elk calves. The late winter is a stress period for white-tailed deer as well as elk. It's due to limited forage availability, also occurs in late summer. But additionally, with Wyoming being kind of the poster child, tourism and hunting are also very important reasons that supplemental feeding occurs in the West. There are the National Elk Refuge in Wyoming near Jackson Hole, where there are tours and sleigh rides where people go and view thousands of elk lined up in a row feeding. The outfitters, particularly out west, want to make sure that elk populations remain stable and remain high. So there's a lot of interest and pressure to continue supplemental feeding of elk in the western states. And if you want to learn a little bit more about supplemental feeding, there's an excellent book written by Bruce Smith, who was the biologist at the National Elk Refuge for 22 years. And it's kind of a memoir, talks about elk management with a lot of focus about supplemental feeding. Some additional reasons they do a lot of supplemental feeding at West is commingling with livestock. When you have elk coming down, getting into haystacks, or potentially coming into residential areas and eating everybody's shrubs, some state agencies have implemented feed sites to reduce those conflicts. As I mentioned, there are a few western states that do supplemental feed their elk herd. Washington State, Wyoming, Oregon, and Idaho. With Wyoming having a fairly substantial program, there are approximately 24 feed grounds established by the state agency, as well as one feed ground at the National Elk Refuge that's managed by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Eastern states, we have about 9 with elk herds. It is not common to feed elk here in the eastern U.S., Minnesota being the exception. They have a couple of programs where they have fed elk and deer, and it was really 2 different programs. Number one, in cases where they had severe winters, they would put out feed, but also they had a program that they termed short stopping, where they had migrating deer and elk that would come and cause conflicts with landowners, and to short stop those animals from getting to private lands, they established feed sites. Now, Minnesota's not done that in a number of years, and they're trying to phase that out. So with that background, all in all, what are the pros and cons for feeding elk? As I mentioned, in western states, Wyoming and Idaho, where you have very severe winters, limited forage availability, they have increased calf survival in areas where they do feed. It may reduce landowner conflicts if you have elk accustomed to coming to these feed sites. They will come and utilize those annually. Depending on range conditions determines when they would arrive, but they may reduce those conflicts. Jackson Hole is right outside the National Elk Refuge, and if they didn't feed, I'm sure they would have a lot of elk coming into the private lands. And it may improve body condition because you're providing a forage base of nutritious forage in late winter, that stress period. Cons, of course, there are disease concerns. We have a CWD response plan. A lot of states do. Typically, chronic wasting disease plans will identify that supplemental feeding or baiting can congregate animals and thus facilitate transmission. So there's always concerns with other diseases, but CWD certainly is a poster child for that. Mixed messaging. So some state agencies have specific bans on providing supplemental feed or bait. Many state agencies will encourage the general public not to feed wildlife, that wildlife has evolved and is self-sustaining and does not require human intervention. Additional reasons, the Wildlife Society is a professional organization of biologists that has a position paper that basically spells out the issue and their rationale for reasons that they do not support supplemental feeding. And then, closer to home, our partners, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, they do not support supplemental feeding. They understand some state agencies do it, but they're not supportive of initiating such a program, as well as folks at the UT Center for Wildlife Health, being disease biologists, professional types, as well as wildlife biologists. They do not support initiating such a program. So that's kind of a brief overview of the supplemental feeding issue. I want to change gears a little bit and just give kind of a quick update about elk research and kind of where we're going. Currently using funds primarily from the conservation tag that is auctioned each year, we have about 14 GPS collars that will be deployed this winter. And GPS collars are great pieces of technology that can provide a 2 or 3 meter accurate location of elk once a day. Traditional telemetry where humans are out with receivers and antennas trying to locate animals, you can't get that accuracy, and in mountainous terrain it's tough to even find the animals. GPS collars are great. They provide a lot of interesting data where we can look at movements, we can look at survival, we can look at home range sizes, what types of habitat are used at various times of the year, what types of habitats are selected for calving. So anyway, long story short, we're moving in that direction as funding allows, and hopefully in February, March, I'll be coming back before you guys, probably with some University of Tennessee researchers to talk about future elk research interests that are going to use additional GPS collar technology and some DNA work and elk fecal work that will answer some really unique questions. Some state agencies and federal folks have used elk fecal DNA to estimate population size. That's a direction we're trying to go. You can also look at what the elk are eating by season and do a forage analysis, what forages are preferred. You can, using GPS collars, do survival analysis and determine sex ratios using that fecal DNA as well. So you can kind of see what your cow-bull ratios are across a landscape. So it's got a lot of advantages. And earlier, it was mentioned about collecting DNA for the white-tailed deer. Using the DNA that we will collect, if we go forward with this research, we'll be able to answer some really unique questions about the composition of our elk herd. When elk were imported from Elk Island, we really had 2 unique lineages, if you will, and based on some incidental GPS work that Tennessee has been doing, it looks like these lineages are sort of persisting in the population, which you wouldn't expect. You would expect some mixing. So it'll be interesting to see how those are spread across the landscape when you couple geographic information with genetic fingerprints. So more to come. So that was really brief, but I'd be glad to take any questions you guys might have.
I have a question. Mr. Miller, I appreciate you responding to my request of looking into what we needed to do this year for supplemental feeding. And I'm very excited we have an elk coordinator. I've been on the commission 8 years, and I've watched the elk program grow. But my response or my question to you last at the October meeting was that I just recently had, when I was coming back from the meeting in September, we happened to pass over Hatfield Knob, and it was just bare ground. And so I just picked up the phone and made a phone call to ask what the elk were eating, and I did get the information that we had a bumper acorn crop and all. And so I think that was what the biologist felt like that was supplementing the loss of the grass that the elk on Hatfield Knob are normally eating. I just want to state that I'm very much against supplemental feeding. I'm very much against baiting, and I think this whole commission backs me on that. We're not about that. But we are about making sure in severe times that we protect the health of our wildlife. We did that last year when the flooding, we shut down deer season because we felt like there was too much stress on our whitetail. We're the driest we've ever been in history in East Tennessee. And we have 70 elk on the Hatfield Knob area that we don't hunt, that is basically for viewing. I'm not saying going out there and start rolling out bales of hay, but somewhere out of sight from the public viewing tower. I don't understand why it was a difficult decision to make sure that these elk didn't leave this area to get run over by cars or to disturb the private landowners that have been complaining all summer to us. And so I appreciate the effort you've been to describe why we don't supplemental feed. I'm 100% behind that. But I think in severe times and desperate times, you take desperate measures. And I just think as a commission, we are concerned about, and I guess I'm speaking for the rest of them, that we've had the discussion among, we just in desperate times, we want to be logical and not be thinking so much on the science, but just on what it takes to make sure we ensure what we're trying to accomplish. And so I appreciate your efforts, and I'm not being confrontational with you at all. I'm just saying, I just think sometimes it's not the right thing to do for us to have our head in the sand and say, normally this is the way it is, and I agree 100%, but this wasn't a normal year by any means. But I respect y'all's opinion, and I'm not going to be up here arguing with you. That's the reason I wanted it to be looked into in October, and I appreciate your efforts.
I got a question. Up there, like all those areas we got in our elk areas, do we have the ability to sell timber off of those areas, or is that back to the mining companies?
That's a complex question, really. Certain areas are still owned, and the previous owner still has some timber rights, and John Mike may jump up and chime in if needed, but other areas we can sell timber. I think we are limited by a couple of factors with maintaining a rotation age so that we don't over-harvest. And then I'm not sure what other constraints we may have. On average, I think we're doing about 150 or so acres harvested per year, which is not a lot over such a large area. When I was interviewing for this position, we actually, the interviewees had to provide a PowerPoint presentation about what we might do with the Tennessee elk herd. And one of the things that I pointed out was, number one, developing a strategic elk plan and some nuisance elk stuff, but also really getting into what we can do as far as future habitat work. And I actually have a meeting next Thursday where we're going to get rolling on this now that the hunting season's over and we're wrapping up elk surveys, to identify some, I don't know what the terminology will be, but elk focal areas where we're going to possibly create some larger wildlife openings, but couple that with forest management and prescribed fire, almost oak woodland kind of things. You read historical accounts about what the elk had access to 200 years ago, 300 years ago, and it was, these rolling savannas nearly of less canopy and more grasses and forbs. Maybe I'm going too long, but
No, that's what I wanted to hear. I mean, if we're talking about 150 acres, we ought to be talking about 1,500 acres a year over the area we've got. If we're selling, if we could sell 20 acre boundaries at a time to high bidder, and be generating revenue for the agency and creating early successional habitat for the elk. I think that's what we ought to be looking at, in my opinion.
thank you.
I got a question. Do you think biologically, you mentioned the western states that feed because of calf survival, do you believe that it's logical to say that without any grass or grazing, that the calf survival rate would be the same or less or more if acorns and that kind of browse is all they've got, and they compete with bear and deer and turkeys and food, how does that affect going into a wintertime situation?
Yeah, it's tough to predict, right? Because we have a really good mass crop this year. The drought hit us pretty hard with our fall plantings. They're just now starting to spring up and green over in some of these areas. If we continue with the mild winter that we've been having so far, get some more warm days, those may continue to grow, and we may have some tonnage out there on the landscape. If we continue to have warm days, that's less physiological stress on the elk. But looking forward into what January and February may hold in terms of temperature for thermoregulation and the energy that consumes, as well as snow on the ground that may limit existing forage that's out there, because we do have a rotation in our wildlife openings. On average, we have 200 new acres, 250 new acres planted each year, with a total of about 750 acres on the property. A portion of the area was planted previously, so we do have some clover fields and orchard grass fields and things that are out there. It's really those new plantings that were hurt so hard by the drought. So looking forward as to how all that may play into calf survival, I'd really just be speculating a little bit. I don't think we're going to see any massive calf die off and lose that cohort. But we may lose some. Again, my crystal ball broke a long time ago, so I can't adequately answer that question.
Well, I'm going to echo what Commissioner McMillan said. I think all of us agree that a permanent supplemental feeding program is not what we're looking for. But I think that if I, as a matter of fact, think that there are more elk up there than our guys can count or can have seen, but we're still trying to grow the herd. It's still critical that we have as much calf survival as possible. So it seems to me that in stressful years like this, that whether it's hay, alfalfa, or pellets or something is the right thing to try to do to help get them through a hard winter. So I think it makes a lot of common sense to do that, not permanently at all, but something to help that. If we had 2,000 up there, it might be, if you had 10,000 acres of grassland like they do in Kentucky or something, it might be a whole different story, but we don't have that. Our habitat's different from the northern neighboring states, and it puts a lot more pressure on them when they can't graze, which they're grazing animals, as you know. So I'd like to see us throw a little something out there to help them get through the winter.
Well, just to shift oars here a little bit about the elk program, I do have a concern about this past year, and I thought that the commission might want to discuss in the future changes of how we handle the permit, the conservation permit that's auctioned off. That permit, I think this year was at $9,000, I think, and obviously you just showed us collars and different things you had to help support the program. If we're going to continue for that permit to be successful and for people to bid on it, I think we need to take care of that permit a little bit more than we have in the past. I think that permit maybe, in my opinion, I don't know what the commission's thoughts are, but should maybe get first choice of the area they get to hunt, especially when we're closing down some of the better areas. I think he should have gotten, or this permit should be getting first choice maybe after he gets to scout or whatever. I think we need to be encouraging in that permit to be successful, because I think it just helps us having more money for the type of things that we want to spend for the program. So I'll just leave that up to discussion, but that's just my opinion.
I'll weigh in on that. We did discuss that at the last elk team meeting we had, and other states do give first choice to the successful winner of the auction. We had a tough year this fall because a couple of our best zones were closed to rest, and the gentleman that bought the eBay tag drew what is really the toughest zone. So it was kind of a confluence of tragic factors this fall. If we went forward and did allow first dibs to the winner, they would likely be very successful.
I mean, I obviously think that's important, because otherwise you're not gonna get enough interest in people bidding on it the next year if it's out there that the year before they did draw the war, and that's just the way we had it set up, and this couldn't be helped. But maybe it needs to be changed so that we can encourage it to increase the odds that there are a successful hunt each year.
Sorry, I didn't have my mic on. If there's nothing else, we'll move forward. The Wildlife Management Committee. Thank you very much. John Gregory, Manager of Region 4.
Thank you, Chairman Teague. Let me see if I can, got a real short PowerPoint. We've run a situation that has been there for a while, and what it is we want to amend the WMA proclamation to fix a problem that we have at Buffalo Springs Wildlife Management Area / hatchery. Both are located on the same piece of land. And what has occurred is that the spring-fed creek that runs through our property goes over a waterfall, and over time, and we've even helped maintain it, there's a pipe that gravity feeds and pours out through the pipe that the farmers need for their cattle operations. So it's been going on for years and years, and they come in with their trucks and pull them up underneath and fill them up and then go take care of their cattle needs. Of course, with the drought, this need has been extremely increased, the amount of need and the dependence for this water. And it really wasn't an issue until the time change. And we have set the current WMA rules, put this area closed an hour after sunset, and it doesn't open back up till an hour before sunrise. And as you can think, a pull-off place that you can get tucked around in the corner out of sight seems to draw the wrong kind of clientele. So that's why we established that closed time zone during the evening hours. But with this drought and the time change, the farmers were just having a problem being able to get there during the close, out inside the open periods. And so what we want to do is change the WMA proclamation 1633 to Proclamation 1650 with the changes as you see in red that would allow the WMA manager to accept, to allow certain type activities to occur at the parking area there at the waterfall, and but still be able to discourage those uses that we don't want to have happen at the parking area. And it kind of came to a head because we had both entities there at the same time at closed hours, and we were wanting to run one off and work with the farmers, but we were kind of put into a catch-22 that we needed to treat everybody the same until we could get this change. So the agency is recommending that we change Proclamation 1633, and the only section being impacted is the Buffalo Springs WMA, and it'd be a new Proc 1650.
Mr. Chairman, I move passage of Proclamation 1650.
Second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments from the Wildlife Management Committee or questions?
I really appreciate you doing this for the farmers.
It took about maybe 30 minutes
for the word to get out all through the community that the agency wasn't working with the farmers. And we really weren't doing that, but we did have to discourage those that evening from not being able to do their thing, so didn't take long.
Any, one from the audience? Comment? If there's no further comments, all on the Wildlife Management Committee in favor passage of Proclamation 16-50, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Proclamation passes committee. Chairman Cannon.
Thank you, Chairman Teague. I'm going to take that in the form of a motion from the Wildlife Management Committee for the passage of Proclamation 16-50 as presented. Do I have a second? Second. Have a second from Commissioner McMillan. Is there any additional discussion within the commission? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, all in favor of Proclamation 1650 as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Proclamation 16-50 passes. The commission recognizes Chairman David Watson of the Budget Committee.
Thank you.
I'd like to call Tim Churchill up, please. As he's coming, I'd like to remind everybody, we are in committee right now, the Budget Committee.
Here we go. My request today is a budget expansion of $150,000. It's all federal wildlife restoration money to purchase approximately 50 acres. I'm not sure why this isn't up here. Okay, now you can see it, and you all should have it in your books as well. But this is at the Pea Ridge Wildlife Management Area. It gives us connectivity to the major road. It just expands that portion of the WMA to the west a little bit, and it's about 50 acres. And I haven't had it appraised yet, but we think it's about $200,000. It's fairly expensive up there for some reason, but we've got a match coming from the Tennessee Parks and Greenways Foundation.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the public? Okay, the committee will be voting. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Excuse me, let me back up. Need a motion. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Now, got a motion now. Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against? Okay. Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee recommends passing budget expansion FY17 for NAR track acquisition for $150,000.
Thank you, Chairman Watson. I'm receiving that in the form of a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commission, you've heard, we have a second by Commissioner Bledsoe. Commission, you have heard the presentation. Are there any questions or comments regarding this? Any questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, all in favor of the passage of the budget expansion for the Varney track in the amount of $150,000 indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The Varney track acquisition is approved. Chairman Watson.
Mark Goolan.
Thank you.